Hi there, welcome to Gnostic Vlog Confessio 14. I almost didn't think I was going to do a vlog this week at all. I haven't been feeling very well, emotionally or physically. But here I am. And I was watching one of the shows, a show called Sherlock, which is pretty popular in the UK. And I think it's still going. And it may have been exported to the USA. I don't know. With Sherlock Holmes, but it's a kind of a modernised version of Sherlock Holmes called Sherlock, and it started off very very good. Now it's been dumbed down, presumably for an American audience. What else? And it's more like Joker or Batman or Robin now. Or Superman or something. But before it was kind of quirky, an interesting modernist style which you either liked or didn't like. And I suppose it wasn't a particularly popular style because it was so quirky. Do you know what I mean? But I liked it actually after a while. I watched it a couple of times. Anyway, the famous meeting, but the famous last denouement between Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty was reproduced on top of an old London building. And without going into any details, which might spoil it, the thing about it is that, Moriarty says, to Sherlock Holmes, I thought you were on the side of the angels. And Sherlock Holmes replies, I may be on the side of the angels, but it doesn't mean to say that I have to be angelic. And then he punches Moriarty. I think this is, I don't think Gnostics are supposed to be nice people necessarily. In fact, I don't think any evangelical needs to be a nice person, or indeed any spiritual person. I'm not a New Ager, for example. I used to be. And a New Ager has to go around, with an inane smile on their face, saying everybody is lovely and everything is wonderful in the garden. And you have to treat everybody, like they were made of paper mache. But this actually isn't the case at all. I mean, traditionally, spiritual people like saints and rishis and mullahs and they could be kind of quite nasty people actually. um, they could be quite offensive, vulgar. There's lots of stories from Hinduism of rishis being pretty obnoxious, actually. And of course, Jesus cursing the fig tree and driving out the money changers from the temple. He actually fashioned whips, two whips to do it. So it's like premeditated violence on the part of Jesus. So when you see all these sort of born again, so Westboro Baptist Church, I don't see why they have to be nice people, really. You can be as intolerant and obnoxious as you like, really, I think. Just because you're spiritual doesn't mean to say you have to be all nice and liberal and happy clappy and, and forgiving everybody left, right and centre. But of course, on the other hand, you shouldn't be like the Kill Bill character either, who's this great sort of martial arts teacher who's incredibly cruel and horrible to people because his reason for that was he said he was hired to teach martial arts to assassins, professional assassins. Well, of course, there's no honour in being a professional assassin. So, in fact, that guru, that teacher in Kill Bill, really has no honour himself. His kind of obnoxiousness is quite genuine, in fact, because he is wrong himself. I mean, he's doing wrong because he's training professional killers. And he's not training martial arts for honour, but for dishonourable reasons and getting paid for it as well by gangsters. So he's got sort of no right. He's not on the side of the angels. and he's definitely not angelic. But I think it's possible to be on the side of the angels and not particularly angelic yourself. And you can lose your temper, and you can, fight back. So I deal with trolls, for example, and the only way that trolls know how to be dealt with, which is, with all guns blazing. I sock it back at you, and I make you feel bullied and uncomfortable, because then I don't hear a single word from a troll ever again. And this is how to deal with the troll. Um, and then you don't have any response whatsoever after that. I mean, obviously, if you sort of respond to them, then you've got their attention. And you could say that being angry with them has certainly got their attention. But on the other hand, if you're very, very vicious and very angry and very bullying and very nasty to the trolls, they really, really, some of them really are frightened away by this. And after all, it's only the internet. And I have to say that I don't really see much value in the internet. I don't have I don't have any respect for the internet, to be perfectly honest with you. I never had any respect for it when I first heard about it being invented in the late 1990s. I just thought, you'll regret this, my lad. The thought of peer to peer communication between people's computers. I thought, well, you know where that's going to end up, which it pretty much has. And the wild west of the World Wide Web is a wild west. And they're trying to regulate it. I mean, they're trying to, make it more sedate, and they're trying to make it more peaceable, and they're trying to make it more legal. But I mean, there's still the deep web where anything goes. It's just, I know YouTube are trying to, clean up their act and trying to make things, suitable for young people and children and all that. Responding to legislation, and that, of course, that legislation, I honestly believe, is a load of old poppycock. Really, it is, because I'm quite certain that Google and YouTube can clean up its own act, really. And to a large extent, it actually did. It doesn't need this legislation at all. And like most legislation that tries to, I don't know, tries to corral people's expressions, is bound to fail, really. And but YouTube, I mean, it's sort of, I suppose it sends a message to YouTube. You've got to be responsible because you are providing content to the world. I mean, they always had community rules. So I don't know why legislation is needed above and beyond community rules of a private enterprise. I notice this legislation about children has got nothing to do with making YouTube be more responsible for freedom of speech. Which as a private company, it doesn't have to be at all responsible for freedom of speech, and does not have to uphold anybody's human rights at all. That's the problem with having a corporation run the channels of expression. But that's the way it is, and that's what you have to work with and work within. It always was like that. I mean, people, you could be prosecuted, for example, for sending obscene poetry through the Royal Mail. Alistair Crowley was himself, and other people have been prosecuted for sending obscene poetry in open postcards, which, deliberately, I suppose, they just to be naughty, and they did get prosecuted. Because the post office clerks used to read this obscene, usually gay poetry, and and they complained to the police about it. Why should we have to deliver this obscene poetry from one address to another? And the Royal Mail obviously was state owned, but it was still legislation, I suppose, to protect the employees of Royal Mail. in the UK. From having to read postcards that said disgusting things. But I suppose, and also you could get a court order for people to open letters as well, which is probably still done. So I mean, there's nothing new about the state poking its nose into business, into where it's not wanted, or private companies, from being concerned about it, about the corporate image. So I mean, nothing's really different about that. It's just the internet. It happens on a wider, huge scale kind of thing. And of course, policing the internet obviously has become a huge, huge business in itself. Because of the sheer immensity of the problem. I mean, there are more HTML pages than there are people on the planet, considerably more. And each one of those HTML pages is potentially a source of illegality and slander and defamation and a whole lot more illegal, sort of illegal, immoral stuff that goes on. But I don't see that being a spiritual person has got much to do with being a nice person. I mean, obviously, you're cultivating kindness and cultivating niceness because you are on the side of the angels, and you're trying to, you're trying to emulate the wisdom and the kindness and the love of the angels and the love of the Holy Spirit for man. You're trying to emulate it. But with all emulations, an emulation is an emulation. It's not the real thing. It's something that's trying to be something else. So, you're trying to be nice to people, and you do your best to be nice to people, but it can't be guaranteed, you see. Whereas unconditional love can be guaranteed from the Holy Spirit, I can't guarantee that I will love you unconditionally, and I can't, and other people can't guarantee that they will love me unconditionally if I really, really wind them up enough. Yeah. And of course, trolls, you could argue that trolls are wound up by something that you put up on YouTube to such an extent that they begin to troll you. And they're not even sort of professional trolls. I mean, a lot of people just do trolling, not as a sort of pastime, but they begin to become very, very aggressive against people that they really, really don't like the opinions of, and that's probably fair enough as well. So I never block anybody or ban anybody from anything, but I don't think that being nice is necessarily part of being spiritual. We are all sinners. We are not perfect. We are imperfect by definition. And if you want perfection, you come not to me, but go to the Holy Spirit or go to Jesus instead. Because I and other evangelicals, other people, clergy, we're not necessarily going to be your best buddies. You know what I mean? We're going to try to be your best friend, or we're going to try to be polite and kind to you if we can. But it isn't guaranteed. That's my point, you see. So on that basis, I don't really feel guilty for being on the side of the angels and yet not myself being angelic. I don't think that's hypocritical at all. I don't see why some people that are on the side of the angels need to be nice people at all. I really don't see there's a logical connection. Because at best you're emulating the niceness of the Holy Spirit, and at worst you're almost trying to be something that you're not, because we are human beings, and therefore we have a dark side and a light side. Therefore we have on this particular dimension of the demiurge, we have creative, preserving, and destructive sides to us in all their complexity. We are complex human beings, and if you look at Madame Blavatsky, for example, and some people hated her, and some people thought she was a bully and a martinet, and were terrified of her, and other people thought that she was very absolutely sweet and soft as butter, which I think she could be, very sweet, but she also could be a bit of a tartar as well. And I don't think that anyone should feel guilty about being who they are, or feel guilty about being themselves.